Hi, everybody. I'm Beth, and I can't sleep, I can't eat, I cry for no reason, and I don't know what to do now. It all started when my mother's sister and her son came to visit us. His name is Dylan, and he's weird. I hadn't seen my cousin in a long time, but I had heard that he had a bunch of strange problems. For example, he would never take his beanie off because the previous year he had tried to cut his own ear off, like a certain famous artist from the last century. He also muttered to himself all the time, and he was constantly staring at me. I felt uneasy being under the same roof with him, even for one night. But it turned out that they had come to stay with us for 2 weeks. I immediately told my mother that Dylan was acting strange, but she figured that I was picking on him and told me that he was just shy and reserved, especially since his father died 3 years ago. A couple of days later, we were left at home alone, and here's what he did. It was very hot. I was sunbathing by the pool when I again felt an uneasy feeling. I opened my eyes, and sure enough, the moron was watching me from the bedroom window. He was seriously starting to scare me. I closed my eyes and dozed off. And when I woke up, Dylan was lying next to me. I wanted to tell my mom about it, but for some reason, I kept silent. But I decided that I would never be alone at home with him again. Yeah, right. We spent almost 2 whole days alone together, without ever being able to leave the house. Here's how it happened. On Sunday, our mothers went to a market in the next town. They were supposed to return that evening, but a strong wind kicked up around lunchtime. And then it started raining cats and dogs. My mom called me with the good news that they would be spending the night there because it was too dangerous to drive. She wasn't even thinking about the fact that spending the night under the same roof with my cousin was no less dangerous for me. I wasn't going to stay with that psycho, so I decided to go to my friend's house as soon as the storm died down. Dylan and I spent the entire evening in silence and didn't say a word to each other. It was time to go to bed, but I had no idea how I was going to fall asleep alone with him in an empty house. And she was playing for time on the internet. Dylan snuck up on me and scared me to death. And then he suddenly asked if I wanted hot chocolate. I said yes. The smell of chocolate calmed me down a bit, and then Dylan added that we could drink it in his room. After all, it would be better to wait out the storm with company. I still don't know why, but I followed him. When he closed his bedroom door behind me, I remembered that I had forgotten my phone in the kitchen. So if anything were to happen, I wouldn't be able to call for help. I was about to go back for my phone when Dylan said that he could read to me if I didn't mind. It turned out that he wrote poetry about everything in the world, and even about me. There were some pretty cute lines about how dimples appear on my cheeks when I smile. No one had ever written poetry to me. At least, none of my friends would do that. Dylan told me that he was always coming up with new poems and reciting them to himself. And then, the reason for his incomprehensible muttering had become clear to me. And then, I took off his ridiculous hat. It turned out that he was pretty cute, and both of his ears were there. Then I started asking him questions. I still don't know why. What happened next was my fault. I asked Dylan if he dated girls. He hesitated and said that he found it difficult to get along with people, especially with girls, because he was shy and closed off, especially after his dad passed away. That's when he started writing poetry. He had already fallen in love with girls several times, but they didn't even know, except for one. He had decided to send her a poem about how he felt, but then she laughed at him. I asked him if he had ever kissed anyone. Suddenly, Dylan took my face in his hands and kissed me tenderly. For real. It was strange and enjoyable. And then we lay on the floor for a long time and talked about everything that came to mind. The next morning, we cooked breakfast together and were like best friends. Even his strange hat stopped bothering me. When our mothers got back, they didn't understand that something had happened between us. We went to the movies, and then to a cafe, and then we walked until it got dark. And it went on like that every day. We didn't kiss again, but we were always together. The night before he had to leave, we snuck out of the house when everyone was asleep. We looked at the sky, and for the first time in my life, I tasted something stronger than beer. And then Dylan pulled something out of his pocket and told me that his best poems came from it. Stars are in the sky. Cinnabon is in the pie. People often cry. Only we're getting high. The next day, Dylan left. When we said goodbye, I could hardly hold back my tears. And when they got into the car, I suddenly shouted that I loved him. Our mothers had a laugh over how I had warmed up to him. Dylan didn't answer me. He just looked at me the only way he could. And for a couple of months now, I've been thinking about him all the time and how I feel about him. And he hasn't even messaged me. I called him once, but the conversation turned out to be dry. I decided that it would be better for us to meet in person. I'm saving money to go visit them. But am I doing the right thing? What am I hoping for? It's complete nonsense, and we can't be together. I know I shouldn't feel anything for him, but I can't help it. Tell me what you think about all this, and what I should do. Thanks.
Hey bros, my name is Rick. I listen to rap. Today, I'm gonna tell you my unusual story and how I fell in love with my dad's housekeeper, and how it all turned out. My dad is very rich, not like Bill Gates, but not bad either. We live in a big house. Me, Dad, and a dog named Damien. Which name do you like more, Rick or Damien? I like Damien, and I feel like Dad gave his dog a better name than his son. My mom died when I was 3 years old, according to my father. As I already mentioned, our house is very large, and Dad is a very busy man, so there were all sorts of strange girls cleaning up our property. Honestly, until I was 15, I didn't even pay attention to them. Dad's housekeepers, that is. But then something clicked inside me. Guys, you know what I'm talking about. I started watching them closely. They cleaned our house so beautifully. So after the dismissal of our last cleaning lady, she showed up. Katie, that was her name. I was 17 at the time, and she was 22. It was my first real love. Long legs, a cute face and body. Oh my god, her curves. That amazing girl even did stretches at our house when she had a spare minute. Since I wasn't at all shy around girls, I walked right over and introduced myself to her. No problem. That evening, I decided to get to know her better. We were sitting in the living room, sipping tea and talking. I told her about my school life, and she told me about her adult life. She probably wasn't very interested in listening to a 17-year-old, but she at least kept listening to me and smiling. When she started talking about herself, she put her hand on my knee. It was so nice. She told me that she hated school, so she dropped out. She worked as a dancer at a men's club. Then she got up, turned on the music, and danced for me. And then I went nuts. Oh my god, we had our own in-house model, a professional dancer. Basically, I got to know everything about her that night. I would sit in class and think all day about when I would finally get to go home and see her again. Every time she bent over to get something off the floor, I would watch her. She was the only girl I didn't want Dad to fire. One night, she was cleaning up my room when we got into a conversation and got closer. I could see her lips. Oh, I thought there would never be a better moment than this, especially since she didn't mind. She was letting me get so close to her. And then I leaned closer to kiss her. I closed my eyes, did everything like in the movies. But she just freaked out and stepped to the side. You should have seen the look of surprise on her face. She said, chuckling, "Are you crazy? They'll throw me in jail." And she continued to giggle. I felt so freaking awkward. But then she stopped laughing and said seriously, "Do you want me to teach you?" She set aside all of her cleaning supplies and came up to me. We kissed. It was simply incredible. I still remember that moment. After the kiss, she smiled, put on gloves, and went to clean up the dog in our yard. An incredible girl. I was in heaven until one day, I came home early. Dad was home, so I immediately thought to myself, no kisses today. I saw her gloves, the vacuum cleaner, and her uniform, and I heard some sounds coming from the second floor. Oh, I knew what it was. Dad was giving it to her. I immediately realized what they were doing up there and decided just to leave the house so that neither myself nor them would be embarrassed. I was gone for an hour and a half. I wondered how I was going to kiss a girl who was also kissing my father. And not only kisses. Gross! Okay, fine. So when I approached her again, I tried to hint at her that it was time for us to do our thing. She answered, "Let's stop with the games. I know you're going through puberty, but chill, man." No one had ever done me like that before. Girls were usually chasing after me because they knew I was from a wealthy family. But this bimbo had the nerve to talk to me like that. At first, she was smiling at me, but now she had switched to my father. I saw her become more and more flirtatious with Dad. He would either pinch her or put his arm around her. I had gotten sick of it. One time, they were cuddling and watching television. I wouldn't even be telling this disastrous story, if not for what had happened. My most ingenious plan of revenge. When nobody was home, I let Damien into the house. I brought a few piles of dog shit and scattered them around the house. When she arrived, she was in shock. And when Dad arrived, he was even more shocked. Our cleaning lady hadn't kept track of the dog. Of course, they found out that I was to blame. A few days later, she came up to me and pressed me up against the wall. She said something like, "You stupid little asshole, don't mess with my work." I don't know, but it seemed to me like she was only interested in my father's money, which really bothered me. The situation with Damien and the shit piles was repeated more often, and I started littering and throwing everything on the floor. After several such stunts, my father decided to have a serious talk with me. I already didn't care, so I proudly told him that I had sucked face with his housewife. I thought he would give me a slap on the face and tear me a new one. But it went like this. "Wow, really? Awesome. Well, I'm sleeping with her," he said, chuckling. To be honest, it freaked me out a little. I saw my dad differently then. Man, I love my dad. He understood me and decided to fire Kate. I waved goodbye to her and said, "Thanks for the kisses."